Are you ever really without fame? Justine Bateman once posed this question to an interviewer, her voice steady, but her eyes betraying something darker. A woman who had lived inside the machine and survived to tell about it. For millions of Americans who grew up in the 1980s, Justine was Mallory Keaton, the fashionable boy-crazy sister on Family Ties, a character so beloved that her face appeared on lunchboxes and bedroom walls across the country. She was everywhere, and then, seemingly overnight, she was nowhere. The public assumed scandal. They whispered about drugs, mental breakdowns, feuds with castmates, the usual Hollywood casualties. But the truth was far more unsettling. Justine Bateman didn't fall from grace. She walked away from it, deliberately, defiantly, after refusing a deal that could have extended her career for decades. Picture this. A woman in her early 30s, standing in a sterile Beverly Hills clinic, surrounded by before and after photos of actresses who'd made the right choice. Her agents had been clear. The roles would keep coming, the paychecks would keep clearing, but only if she fixed her face. The procedures were routine now, they assured her. Everyone was doing it. Just a little lift here, some filler there, preservation of the brand. She walked out without looking back. It wasn't about vanity. It was about something far more fundamental. The right to exist in her own skin, to age like a human being rather than a product with an expiration date. That single refusal, that quiet no, spoken in a consultation room most people will never see, effectively ended her mainstream acting career. But decades later, that same defiance would spark a revolution, positioning Justine not as a cautionary tale of faded stardom, but as a prophet who saw what Hollywood was becoming and refused to participate in the lie. Justine Tanya Bateman entered the world on February 19, 1966, in Rye, New York, the daughter of two people who understood performance as a way of life. Her mother, Victoria, had been a Pan Am flight attendant, a profession that in those days meant embodying grace under pressure, maintaining composure at 30,000 feet. Her father, Kent Bateman, was a theatrical manager and producer, a man who saw potential the way miners see gold deposits, waiting to be extracted and refined. The Bateman household wasn't like other homes. While neighborhood children were playing make-believe, Justine was studying it. Scripts covered every surface. Actors rehearsed scenes in the living room, their voices rising and falling with practiced emotion. Dinner table conversations revolved around blocking, motivation, and whether a particular line reading landed. For most children, bedtime stories involved dragons and princesses. For Justine, they involved the three-act structure and what makes a character compelling. She was fluent in adult ambition before she understood childhood innocence. Her younger brother Jason emerged as both mirror and rival, two prodigies shaped by a father who measured confidence like test scores, who believed that talent without discipline was just noise. Kent Bateman didn't raise children, he cultivated performers. The family moved frequently, New York to Utah, Utah to California. Each relocation, another disruption. Another school where Justine had to rebuild her social standing from scratch. This constant impermanence taught her to adapt quickly, to read rooms, and adjust her performance accordingly. But it also left her perpetually searching for belonging, for some stable ground beneath her feet. Years later, psychologists would identify this pattern in child performers. Early sophistication masking emotional underdevelopment, the ability to simulate adult competence while remaining fundamentally unmoored. Justine learned to control what she projected, but that control came at a cost. The seed of perfectionism planted in those early years would eventually clash violently with Hollywood's demands for compliance. Kent Bateman ran his children's development like a military operation. Evenings weren't for homework and television. They were for timed monologues, self-critiques, and what he called performance reports, detailed assessments of what worked and what needed improvement. At 12 years old, Justine experienced anxiety, not about tests or social hierarchies, but about disappointing her father, about not being sharp enough, polished enough, ready enough. She lived a double life. At public school, she was an outcast, the girl who talked differently, who carried herself with an unsettling maturity. Her classmates mocked Hollywood Justine, invented rumors about her arrogance, misread her discipline as conceit. Teachers assumed she thought herself above the mundane work of regular students. The truth was simpler and sadder. She was just trying to survive in two incompatible worlds simultaneously. Her thick skin formed early, but beneath it was something far more fragile, a child who desperately wanted to be normal while being trained for anything but. When the family made their final move to Los Angeles, adolescence transformed into business. The audition circuit was brutal. 150 auditions in 18 months, each rejection meticulously recorded in Kent's notebooks. He tracked patterns, identified weaknesses, adjusted the approach. Justine learned to smile through humiliation, to accept that 99 doors would slam before one opened. Her first victory was modest. A commercial, a few seconds of screen time, a small paycheck. But it felt monumental because by then, success had become synonymous with survival. Approval wasn't just pleasant, it was necessary, the oxygen her family breathed. That conflation between artistic achievement and existential worth would haunt her for decades. In 1982, 16-year-old Justine Bateman walked into an audition room and laughed. Not a practiced laugh, not a carefully calibrated response, but something genuine and spontaneous that made the casting directors lean forward in their chairs. That unscripted moment rewrote her destiny. She landed the role of Mallory Keaton on Family Ties, a new NBC sitcom about a liberal couple raising conservative children during the Reagan era. The character was initially conceived as reasonably intelligent, but early test audiences responded so enthusiastically to Justine's comedic timing that the writers pivoted. Mallory became the archetypal ditzy sister, obsessed with fashion and boys, the pretty airhead who couldn't locate Nebraska on a map. The irony was exquisite and painful. Off-screen, Justine was sharp, observant, intellectually hungry. On-screen, she played ignorance for laughs week after week. She watched the scripts evolve, noted how her character's intelligence diminished while her brother Alex, played by Michael J. Fox, accumulated all the show's wit and complexity. She voiced concerns, quietly suggested adjustments, and learned quickly that teenage actresses didn't have creative authority. Family Ties exploded. The show leapt from obscurity to top 5 ratings, transforming its young cast into household names. Justine's paycheck climbed to $10,000 per episode, extraordinary money for a teenager in 1983. Her face appeared on magazine covers, lunchboxes, posters. Paparazzi cataloged her movements. Privacy evaporated. She experienced the peculiar isolation of early fame. Peers envied her success while she envied their anonymity, their ability to make mistakes without public documentation, their freedom to be ordinary. The glamour was real. Premieres, parties, access to exclusive spaces, but so was the cage. Every public appearance required performance. Every photograph became permanent evidence. Behind the scenes, cracks formed. The scripts grew repetitive. Creative stagnation set in. The show increasingly revolved around Michael J. Fox's Alex P. Keaton, relegating Justine's Mallory to supportive punchlines. She loved her castmates, appreciated the opportunity, but felt herself shrinking into someone else's idea of who she should be. At 20, she directed an episode. An extraordinarily rare achievement for someone her age, proof of the ambition simmering beneath her actress facade. But directing one episode couldn't satisfy the hunger for creative control, for authorship over her own narrative. The less visible suffering was worse. Like many young actresses, she developed disordered eating patterns, the pressure to remain photogenic, warping her relationship with food and mirrors. Tabloids critiqued her body with casual cruelty, dissecting her appearance as though she existed solely for public consumption. Emmy nominations arrived, 2 of them, but they felt less like recognition and more like handcuffs, confirmation that she'd been successful at something she increasingly wanted to escape. May 14, 1989. 36 million viewers watched the Family Ties finale. There was applause, tears, celebration, And then, the next morning, silence. Fame doesn't fade gradually. It evaporates. The phone stopped ringing. The projects dried up. Justine experienced what many former child stars describe as a kind of death. The extinction of the identity millions of people knew, leaving only the private person beneath, disoriented and grieving. But the real problem was career residue. Casting directors couldn't unsee Mallory Keaton. When Justine auditioned for dramatic roles, they saw the ditzy sister trying to act serious. The character she'd inhabited for 7 years had colonized her professional identity, making reinvention nearly impossible. She tried anyway. Films like The Fatal Image and Deadbolt represented attempts to establish range, to prove she could handle darkness and complexity. But audiences brought their expectations with them, projecting Mallory onto every performance. The disconnect was insurmountable. Deadbolt became an unintentional metaphor for her reality, a thriller about a woman trapped, confined by circumstances beyond her control, desperately seeking escape. Justine was living that script, imprisoned by the role that had made her. The 1990s Hollywood landscape shifted beneath her feet. Studios wanted newer faces, younger actresses, the next generation of it girls. Tabloids began the slow work of aging her out, publishing unflattering photographs, speculating about plastic surgery, treating her 30-year-old face as evidence of decline. The industry's message was clear: reinvent or disappear. Her agents delivered the ultimatum in clinical language. Cosmetic procedures weren't suggestions. They were requirements. Everyone was doing it. The technology had improved. It was simply maintenance, professional upkeep, like getting your teeth cleaned. 3 consultations followed, each one chipping away at her resistance, each surgeon explaining how they could restore her, as though she were a damaged antique rather than a living woman. The internal war was excruciating. One side argued for survival, for pragmatism, for extending her career by playing the game everyone played. The other side asked a more fundamental question: at what cost? If she erased herself to remain employable, what exactly would she have preserved? She walked away from the operating table. It was a quiet act of rebellion, witnessed by no one, documented nowhere. But that refusal effectively ended her mainstream acting career. The roles stopped coming. The industry moved on. The late 1990s brought obscurity. Her phone stayed silent. Friends from the industry gradually faded, their awkward distance revealing how transactional those relationships had been. Justine was learning a hard truth. Hollywood doesn't do friendship. It does mutual utility. But obscurity also offered freedom. She pivoted toward directing, funding short projects from her savings, filming in borrowed spaces with skeleton crews. The budgets were tiny, the distribution non-existent, but for the first time in her professional life, she controlled every creative decision. The work belonged to her. In 2001, she married Mark Fluent, a man blissfully outside the entertainment industry. He offered what Hollywood never could: stability, privacy, genuine partnership. Their life together was deliberately quiet. No premieres, no paparazzi, no performance. Just existence. Motherhood arrived in 2002 with her son Gianetta. Justine made a conscious choice: family over fame, her child's normalcy over her career resurrection. She turned down multi-million-dollar offers, refused reunion specials, declined reality television pitches. Her son would not be raised by the same machine that had consumed her childhood. Her brother Justine Bateman's career was simultaneously ascending. His comeback arc, from child star to respected adult actor, following the trajectory Justine had rejected. Their paths diverged not from competition, but from different definitions of success. Postpartum depression arrived after her daughter's birth, a darkness that forced confrontation with decades of unprocessed trauma. Therapy became excavation work, unearthing the girl who'd been trained to perform strength while feeling fragile, who'd smiled through exploitation because survival demanded it. Healing replaced ambition. For the first time since childhood, Justine prioritized her own well-being over external validation. It was quiet, unglamorous, essential work. In 2012, a 46-year-old former television star walked into a UCLA classroom and sat among teenagers who vaguely recognized her face but couldn't place the context. Paparazzi once screamed her name. Now students checked their phones, unimpressed. Justine Bateman was reclaiming the education Paramount's contract had prevented. While her peers attended college, she'd been shooting 22 episodes per season, working 10-hour days, surrendering adolescence to production schedules. Now, finally, she could study without permission, learn without monetization. Computer science was deliberately challenging. Complex mathematics, coding languages, concepts that resisted her initial attempts at comprehension. Imposter syndrome whispered that she was too old, too far removed, too famous to be taken seriously as a student. But she persisted with the same discipline her father had instilled decades earlier, now channeled toward her own goals rather than his. The early semesters were humbling. She struggled with calculus, staying after class to ask questions she felt embarrassed asking, hiring tutors to explain concepts her younger classmates seemed to grasp intuitively. Programming logic required a different kind of thinking than dramatic performance, precise, systematic, unforgiving of improvisation. Where acting rewarded emotional instinct, coding demanded algorithmic rigor. She sat in the back of lecture halls, taking meticulous notes while 20-year-olds scrolled through social media. During group projects, she encountered the strange dynamic of former celebrity as peer, some students starstruck, others resentful, most simply indifferent. She learned to navigate these micro-politics while mastering Python, Java, and C++, her brain rewiring itself around new syntaxes and problem-solving frameworks. Late nights in the computer lab became her new normal. While Hollywood aged out actresses at 40, academia cared only about whether you understood data structures and object-oriented design. The meritocracy was refreshing, even when it was brutal. Her code either worked or it didn't. There was no publicist to spin failure, no agent to negotiate second chances. The coursework intensified. Algorithm analysis, software engineering, database systems, each class demanding hours of study that cut into her directing work and family time. Mark supported her obsession, understanding that this wasn't about a career pivot, but about reclaiming intellectual authority. Her children watched their mother struggle publicly with homework, a powerful lesson in humility and persistence. By her senior year, something had shifted. The concepts that once felt impenetrable now made intuitive sense. She could debug complex code, architect systems, think in abstractions that bridged human creativity and machine logic. Her final project, a digital platform integrating film production tools with collaborative software, demonstrated how completely she'd merged her two worlds. Graduation came in 2016. Justine Bateman, 50 years old, walked across that stage with a degree in computer science, a symbolic middle finger to Hollywood's youth obsession, proof that reinvention didn't require permission or approval. The accomplishment wasn't just academic, it was existential. She'd proven to herself that her value wasn't tethered to her appearance or her famous past, that her mind could master anything given time and determination. She began straddling two worlds. Occasional guest appearances on shows like Modern Family, pleasant callbacks to her sitcom roots, juxtaposed with nights debugging code and developing software. In 2015, she launched Section 5 Productions, merging artistic vision with technological infrastructure, building the career she'd always wanted on her own terms. Her short films, 5 Minutes, Push, Z, earned festival recognition, small but meaningful validation that she could create compelling work outside the studio system. These weren't vanity projects. They were proof of concept, demonstrations that authenticity could succeed if you controlled the means of production. The technical knowledge from UCLA allowed her to understand every aspect of production in ways most directors never would, from camera sensor data to post-production workflows to distribution algorithms. She'd become that rare artist who could speak fluently in both creative and technical languages, who understood that the future belonged to creators who controlled not just content, but infrastructure. Hollywood had taught her to perform. UCLA taught her to build. In 2018, Justine published Fame, The Hijacking of Reality, a brutal autopsy of celebrity culture written by someone who'd survived the dissection. The book's central insight was devastatingly simple. Fame gives you everything except yourself. It grants access, privilege, attention, but extracts your interiority as payment, transforming you into a public utility rather than a private person. But her real revolution came 3 years later with Face, The Hijacking of Aging, born from a moment of Googling her own name and discovering the phrase, "Justine Bateman looks old," repeated across countless headlines and comment sections. The vitriol was astonishing. Strangers analyzing her wrinkles, declaring her unrecognizable, expressing disgust at her natural aging process. Her response wasn't defensiveness or cosmetic correction. It was defiance. Justine made the deliberate choice to embrace aging publicly, refusing fillers, filters, and surgical intervention. She appeared on camera with visible lines and gray hair, her face an act of resistance against an industry that demanded eternal youth. During a 60 Minutes Australia interview, she delivered a line that went viral. "I think I look rad." The comment ignited global debate. Social media erupted with polarized responses, some celebrating her courage, others criticizing her appearance with renewed vigor. But Justine remained serene through the storm, her peace rooted in a simple truth. She was done performing for approval. Her evolution was complete. She transformed from actress to activist, from image to authenticity, from someone who allowed others to define her worth to someone who claimed that authority for herself. When artificial intelligence threatened to replace human performers, Justine joined the picket lines, delivered speeches, helped establish Credo 23, a festival banning AI-generated content. Her anti-AI crusade connected directly to her lifelong defense of the real faces, real emotions, real human artistry. Technology could simulate performance, but it couldn't replicate the messy, imperfect, glorious reality of actual existence. The full arc reveals itself now, from prodigy molded by others to creator defining her own worth. From Mallory Keaton's scripted ignorance to Justine's hard-won wisdom. From teenage actress surrendering to industry demands to middle-aged woman refusing every compromise. Modern Hollywood is slowly catching up to principles she embodied decades early. Authenticity over artifice, creative control over compliance, recognition that artistic value doesn't expire at 35. Her 2024 essay for Fast Company declared Hollywood is dead, not as bitterness, but as diagnosis, a call to resurrect genuine storytelling from the corporate machinery that killed it. She's become the prototype of the modern multidisciplinary artist, director, coder, author, activist, someone who refuses singular definition, because singular definition was always the trap. The industry wanted her to be Mallory Keaton forever, a two-dimensional character performing perpetual youth. She chose complexity instead. Picture her now, at 59, walking into a sunlit room, wrinkles visible, eyes unafraid. She says simply, "This is who I am. I'm not going anywhere." Her career ended because she refused to erase herself, but that refusal became her ultimate legacy. Permission for everyone who comes after to exist fully, age naturally, prioritize authenticity over approval. Justine Bateman lost Hollywood. In return, she kept herself. That was always the better deal.